Robert Glover. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brent, good to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no worries, man. It's very weird. I didn't know anything about you. I just saw that you had similar hairstyle and beard as me, and I was like,
That's all it took, huh?
That's all it took. I've got to get this guy on. No, all
Well,
joking aside,
let me get the glasses on, and we'll just get the same look. There we go.
twinsies, love it.
I'll go get my hoodie on. We're great.
Man. No. So, all seriousness, your work has been a great help to me. I am 100% nice guy. Had a really traumatic childhood. I know all the reasons why, and your interviews have helped me greatly. And I saw that you were on my buddy Gareth Martin's podcast, Ridiculously Human, and I watched that entire thing, and I've watched a bunch of the other stuff. And I love what you do, right? I love the whole subject matter. That's fascinating to me. But I've also had some very profound psychedelic experiences that have changed my outlook on the world, as they do. And you said something because I used to be, sorry, this is on Gareth's podcast. You said something about like, hey, man, I'm actually really comfortable not knowing what the hell's going on from a spiritual perspective. Yeah. I'm cool knowing there's something going on. Obviously, there's something, very profound going on. I don't know what it is, and I'm kind of cool with that. And for me, that was a liberating experience. So I wanted you to maybe start by talking about, like, how did you even get into psychedelics in the first place? How did that even get presented to you as an option? Maybe start there.
Well, I'll start out by saying I'm actually really a rookie when it comes to psychedelics. But yeah, kind of backtracking a little bit, like you. Yeah, I grew up fundamental Christian church, very conservative Christianity. I did go into the ministry. You considered it. I did it. I was a minister for 8 years. I have 2 degrees in religion. I don't consider myself religious now. I'm actually not a big fan of most religions. I see value of how it can connect people and give people community and help them want to improve and be better. But historically, if you look at most track records of most religions, they're nothing to stand up and cheer about. But anyway, without going too deep into that. So, I think I actually, kind of even just pushed away spirituality for quite some time. And maybe that's not unusual. I find that people that grow up with fundamentalism of almost any kind, could be Christian fundamentalism, it could be Muslim, it could be Judaism, when they start questioning it, often they'll just push it completely away and just go maybe 180 the other direction. And I don't think I just had some overnight, I don't believe in this shit anymore, I'm done with it. It was really just a slow process of, I as I got away from the church I grew up in, and I looked for other churches, and none really inspired me. There's maybe the more traditional, whether it be Catholic or, British, type traditional with the masses and all that, or the wave your hands in the air and sing praise Jesus, reading off the, overhead projector, or the kind of the new thought that, you kind of heard the same sermon every time you went that really didn't challenge you much. And about the only thing I found that really, I thought I resonated with was 12 steps. I got early on in my own personal recovery into a 12-step program and thought, I think this is what the New Testament church was supposed to look like. It's not a shrine for saints, it's a hospital for sinners. It's people that are struggling that go someplace and talk about what's not working and where they're in pain, and people are vulnerable and accepting. And I thought, that feels good. That feels right. And so, like I said, this wasn't just overnight. It was really a number of years. And then, even started looking at the fundamentals of my particular brand of Christianity I grew up in. Even how do we get the Bible? How did the New Testament even come to be? And begin thinking, because the church I was in took everything really literally.
Right.
And if one thing you can say about Jesus, he wasn't literal. He spoke in metaphors and parables and stories, because you can't speak of the eternal. You can't speak of the omnipotent, the omniscient in literal terms. If you listen to any Eastern Guru, if you listen to Buddha, if you listen to Osho, if you listen to, Anthony DeMello, you listen to, Michael Springer, doesn't matter. You can't use literal terminology to describe something that is beyond human comprehension. So the best you can do is tell a story about it, or use a metaphor about it. Now that becomes problematic when you start turning those stories and metaphors into literal, interpretations. It's kind of like I give the example. I heard somebody say one time, if somebody had never eaten a banana and you tried to explain to them, what does it taste like to eat a banana? Okay, how would you describe that? Okay, so there's the problem. Now, in terms of kind of then fast forwarding it into the psychedelics, I got a call or an email probably right around the time of the pandemic beginning, maybe just and it was from somebody at a place called Rhythmia in Costa Rica. That's an ayahuasca retreat center. And the guy contacted me and said, Robert, I love your book. We're planning our first ever men's retreat, and we want you to come be a guest speaker and an influencer, publicize it.
Sure.
And I said, I've smoked pot before. That's about it, and I was a late bloomer at that. I didn't smoke pot till I was in my 30s and probably didn't get high till I was in my 40s. And so I'd never done psychedelics. I grew up during the period of the war on drugs. That if this is your brain on drugs, and this if you take LSD, you're going to think you can fly and jump off a building and kill yourself. And I grew up during that really heavy propaganda of all things that were called drugs were bad and will put you into prison forever if you don't commit suicide first while taking them. So, and I've never been a super adventurous guy. I mean, I'm kind of a play it safe in that if somebody says, let's go do this, I'll either say, have you researched it or done it before? Or I'll research it and then I go, okay, I'll go. And so when they reached out and said, come, I said, well, I've never done ayahuasca, never done psilocybin, never done, anything. And they said, that's okay. Just come and do a couple ceremonies. And I go, okay, I'll commit to that. So I went and they let me bring my wife, even though it was a men's retreat. And I did 4 ceremonies. It got postponed like a year or two because of COVID. So this was like about 3 years ago. And then they invited me back the next year. And then actually I got COVID and it blew up my prostate and had a catheter inserted the day I was supposed to get on the airplane to fly to Costa Rica. I didn't go. So I actually taught a class via Zoom. My wife actually went to that one. She loves the ayahuasca. She loves the puking and all that. Yeah, everybody's got their own thing. And then I went again this last year. They invited me back again. So I've done 8 ayahuasca ceremonies. So there's and even just to show you how non-adventurous I am, before I went to do the first ayahuasca ceremony, my son, who's, into raves and, into all that involves. And he's a very informed, educated guy. He's got a master's degree and runs an agricultural center at Washington State University. And before I went to do this, he gave me a little envelope and I put it in my pocket. And later I said, what'd you just give me? And he said, it's 2 tabs of acid. And I go, okay. Any instructions come with this? And, they're still sitting in a lockbox here. I mean, that's been 3 years ago and I haven't dropped the acid. So to put all that out there, even though I'm really intrigued by research, where things are going with MDMA, with psilocybin, with ayahuasca, LSD doesn't seem to be in the picture so much, maybe because it's a little bit of a wild card. But I'm a therapist by training. I've got a doctorate in marriage and family therapy. And I've been saying for a while, we may look back on what the dark ages of therapy, where we thought just sitting on a couch and letting people talk was actually helpful.
Yeah.
And it is helpful in various ways. But the experimenting they're doing at major universities with MDMA, with psilocybin, to a lesser degree, ayahuasca, because it's kind of tougher to manage. They're finding really great results from doing therapies, and they tend to probably target vets the most because they're easy targets through the VA, I guess, and they're coming back from war zones with PTSD, and so just amazing results, and especially dealing with trauma
Mm.
and releasing trauma from the body and the nervous system. So even though I'm not, up there on the forefront using, you know, I'm a fan, and I think we're just beginning to find out, that there's been stuff in our ecosystem that's been used in one way or another by people for a long, long time, for very, very good reasons. So I think we're coming back to that. So that excites me.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's very funny to me how much we have in common, how many parallels. For example, I never smoked weed until I was like 35 years old.
Yeah,
Like ever in my whole life, like I've never been a drug guy. I actually became aware of psychedelics in general by going to therapy. I started therapy like in my early 40s or mid 40s,
Hmm.
and my therapist was kind of like, he was a PhD at the University of Washington. I actually spent the last 10 years of my life in Seattle area. So
Okay.
another thing
Well,
we have,
well, we
because
have that in common. There we go.
yeah, it's really creepy, honestly. But he was a PhD at the UW, and he worked with people that were homeless, drug addicted, a lot of trauma in their background. And I've got a trauma background, so that's kind of how I ended up in his office. But he's kind of like did the stomp. He's like, "Hey, man, I can't tell you to look into psychedelics, but it was one of those conversations, and I'd never even considered it, and ended up going down that road. And for me, it was completely eye opening. And to your point, like I don't discount talk therapy, I don't discount psychotherapy at all. There is a tremendous value in that and the self knowledge that you can get out of those sessions.
Sure.
But I think augmenting it, I think there's the point you're trying to make. Augmenting it with psychedelics can potentially have much greater impact, right? I think you've referenced some of the work done by people like Robin Carhart Harris at Imperial College London. You've got Johns Hopkins University, Roland Griffiths.
Yeah.
There's a ton of great research that's going on. And from personal experience, I can say that it does feel very much, at least, I don't have any ayahuasca experience. I really want to go down that road. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. You'll
but-
have fun. You'll have fun.
Well, we'll see about that. I don't know if psychedelics can be categorized as fun. It's definitely an experience, but it feels like about a decade of psychotherapy in a single sitting. That's my experience with it. You go for a 6-hour sitting with mushrooms, and I did very heavy doses. I mean, my first one was kind of medium, like 3.5 grams, but I've gone very high doses, and I can tolerate it very well, and I get these wonderful insights out of it. And it does very much feel like a whole bunch of psychotherapy crammed into a single session. And then just the experience itself is so transformative for me. And that's why I wanted to poke at this with you, because you mentioned or alluded to some things in Garrett's podcast about like, hey, this is why I accept all the invitations to be on podcasts. I just want to, it's like the universe is.
Yeah, I think something's going to happen at that kind of hero dose. Is as I get older, I don't know if this is just aging or almost having died a time or two. So kind of, or I think most people will acknowledge the older you get, the less you are sure about anything.
Yes.
I think being youthful, you're sure about everything you're sure about. I think one of my most common responses to most of my inner thought world is, I don't know, and does it matter? And I don't know if it really matters. And I think it's been much more interesting. Like I said, I'm not religious, but I've got a quote from the book of Jeremiah that sits right here in front of me. And I've even thought about getting it tattooed. And it just says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. And ever since coming across this quote, actually, I think I came across it in a fiction book I was reading 2 or 3 years ago. I've been drawn to that. So I pay attention to what I'm drawn to, number one. Mm-hmm. What seems to draw me? What seems to keep coming up in front of me? What seems to, if you hear of the same author 3 times in a week, well, maybe I should check his book out.
Right. Right.
That kind of thing. So I struggle with this quote. I keep it here because I like the struggle that I have with the quote. Is it possible that something called fate exists and that we're on a path that everything that happens on that path is exactly how it's supposed to happen? we think we make a lot of conscious choices, but even neuroscientists are going to tell us we really don't. We really don't. That so much comes out of our subconscious. And even there's evidence that, we actually take actions before we even have the thought, before we're conscious of the thought about it. So, how much free will do we really have? I think, even if you look at it, could we even really claim to have free will as long as we have any degree of shame, any degree of fear, just any degree of self-limiting thinking? Do we have any free will? Do we have free will if we have any unprocessed trauma from childhood, which we all do, and we all have fear, and we all have self-limiting beliefs, we all have shame. And I just know that I see how all of those things affect the decisions I do make. And so what if, how could I even fool myself into thinking I have free will if I have shame, if I have guilt, if I have fear, if I have, unprocessed childhood trauma, if I have unconscious things going on? I don't. And so it's almost, and it's been kind of fun to entertain the idea of fate. Now, I'm not going to preach to you to say I believe in it, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it actually takes more faith, a leap of faith, to live a purposeful life, to pursue your passion, than it does take faith to believe what somebody wrote down 2,000 years ago and is telling you have to believe this to spend eternity in heaven. I think it takes a lot of faith to believe in fate, and that our fate is that we're here to do and experience something meaningful. Now that takes some faith. And anyway, I still don't have the answers. I don't know. And maybe it doesn't matter, but it's kind of a fun process to just be open and be curious. So I guess that's about the best thing I can say is I'm an open-minded skeptic. I won't just take things because somebody tells me, but I am intrigued by just how interesting life is and how it unfolds in such interesting ways.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you and I had a similar trajectory there, where I had the religious upbringing and I rejected it, sort of fell for the new atheist tropes of you've heard all the very low hanging fruit, the ways to literally disprove things that are in the Bible, that very unsophisticated view, and became pretty bitter. I think you can get that way if you sort of wake up one day, you realize, especially if you come from a literal background, like this is the the way it is. This is the word of God. It's inerrant. It is perfect in every. And then somebody points out to you like this is actually really fucking stupid. Like this doesn't make sense if you take it literally. And then you have to go through that.
Talking snakes are kind of hard to take literally,
amongst many other problems, right? So it took, I sort of did that detour as well, but I did pick up on something from the new atheists, particularly ones like Dan Dennett, Sam Harris, people that are neuroscientists. And this is bringing this back around to the topic which you raised around free will. People don't really understand it that well, even people that are very deep in the literature. But I think what you're meaning to allude to is something the literature refers to as libertarian free will, right? That you are the driver of this meat machine, that you're in control of your thoughts and actions. And I think that there's nobody that has any sort of scientific credibility that believes that right now, right? Like as you mentioned, you can just, write down a list. Like I think you called out the shame and the fear and all of the evolved behaviors that are inbuilt in us, all of the epigenetics, right? The switches that turn on and off based on your environment that dictate your behavior, your drives, your appetites. It's pretty dumb to just be like, oh, I have free will. I like Dan Dennett, his compatibilist view, which is like, it's more like free won't. Right? Like you have the ability as things come up to maybe particularly not, split second decisions. Like you mentioned, there's some of those things they measured that the reaction actually happens before it's even conscious.
Yeah.
But things like complex things like I'm doing a strategic plan around, I don't know, what my podcast marketing scheme. And it's things like that you can dictate to some degree and can control. Right.
I think we think we can.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's where it gets real fun, right? Because
it gets fun because we don't. I think if we can just let go of the literalness of a lot of things, and uh, you know, I like the phrase, I'm an I don't knower.
Hmm.
I like knowing I don't know, and I'm okay with that. And at some point, I may come back on your show and go, I know now. I had this, this journey, or I was breathing during meditation, and I had this awareness, and I did, while doing ayahuasca 6 8 months ago, I had the intention of, and I even said to mother, that's what they usually refer to it, or grandmother,
Hmm.
either one. I said, uh, show me the meaning of God and my eternal soul. And it took all about 5 minutes to give me a download on that. And I go,
Wow.
that's it. Well, it's just kind of water and waves, just think about everything as one whole, like the ocean, everything's water, and things manifest and unmanifest, and they come and they go. They never quit being water or ocean, but they, even as they're waves, they have this wave identity, but they never quit being ocean. And I go, that's it. Okay. Answer,
Wow.
there's the answer, water and
That's
waves.
that's so interesting because I've had very similar intuitions or messages that downloaded to me on high doses of psilocybin. There's like this breaking apart of the self, right? This is
Yeah.
sort of, and I think y'all know, you're a smart dude. The default mode network, the whole piece of your brain that recognizes I as I, or the self as self, that
Mm.
dissolves, and you sort of get this overpowering sensation that everything is connected. And to your point, like if you look at me as a discrete thing as opposed to part of the universe, right? I think that's the thing that dissolves when you get into that psychedelic space. You sort of drop that ego, you
Mm.
drop that sort of focus on the me, and sort of blend into the we. And it's very, very unsettling in some regard, but it's
Mm.
also kind of peaceful at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is peaceful. I got peace out of that download. And I just had a thought a couple weeks ago. I got a client that he's also, as he and I are actually working together because he wanted sexual novelty. So he's created a number of open relationships, but it's also led him to a deep spiritual journey. Now every time we talk, well, I was listening to Michael Singer on this one, and I listened to Anthony DeMello on this. So he's got really, it's become a very deep spiritual journey for him. And I left him a message the other day, and I said, I really like this idea of the witness, the
Mm.
witness witnessing Robert. And so instead of saying, like when I walk through airports, like I did this weekend, and I just find myself being judgmental of everybody there because I'm stressed, and
Yeah.
there's people in my way, and people are stupid, and they act like they've never flown before, and they go, I'm thinking, they got up this morning and thought that was a really great outfit to wear to the airport today. My judgments just come up, and it's I'll watch, and now I've started just saying Robert's mind is having these judgments, and then I even can watch from the witness place of Robert being judgmental of himself for having these
Mm.
judgments, right? And so I think it's just a fairly basic, meditative practice. And like you say, getting out of that default mode network is just being able to witness all the I thought, right?
Yep.
And I had this thought, and I shared it with my client the other day, and I says, it just dawned on me, my witness and your witness are probably one and the same because there's no separate self. There is no duality. So the witnessing, Brent thinking and acting is the same witness witnessing Robert thinking and acting. And that witness is also witnessing all that it is, all that is. So kind of
Mm.
even like Jesus' message, look at the birds of the air and the flowers of the field, and a bird doesn't fall from the sky without God noticing, and how much more valuable are you? Well, if you think about it, that's a pretty profound witness that can track every bird that falls out of the sky around the globe. And this is just one small rock in an ever expanding cosmos. And so what if that witness is indeed just all in the same at an atomic level? Just your witness and my witness are the same dude going, hey, Brent's walking around thinking he's Brent. Robert's walking around thinking he's being
Mhm.
Robert. And your witness and my witness are the same, watching both of us, experiencing all that there is to be experienced. Something, yeah, okay, that's pretty far out. I can sit with that for a while. So again, if we're open, it is interesting how things come and we realize we're not the first person who's thought this. We're not the first person to have this experience on an ayahuasca ceremony or a psilocybin or an MDMA microdosing session. It is interesting where there is so much this unity of experience once we get out of this awareness limiting part of this human brain.
Yeah, that is super profound. I've had similar thoughts, and although I was gravitating towards a different Bible verse. There's a Jesus says something about that which you do to least of my children or
You've done to
people,
me.
you do to me. It's like this universality of like I said. I think my take so far. Like I said, I don't know this. It's a belief that I've sort of toyed with. Is that the universe is fundamentally conscious, and there are some scientists that believe this is true, that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, right? It's not in our brains, it's not local in our wetware here, but it's actually in everything. And I think Carl Sagan said, like, the most profound thing he can think of is that from the Big Bang and the universe expanding, and then everything cooling, and then life evolving, and every bit of consciousness that's out there, every living being is sort of the universe being aware of itself, that awareness.
Yeah.
These little pinpoints everywhere there's life, there's like the universe becoming aware of itself. That's incredibly deep, and it's something that I think about a lot.
Think about this again. We're just playing here. Had a couple thoughts. One of them passed, but it'll probably come back. We think, if you think about it, everything is energy. Everything, and we tend to call it atomic energy. Everything is atoms and all the things that make up an atom. And, physicists tell us, I think with quite a bit of certainty, that no new energy has been created since the Big Bang, and none's been lost. That means that every atom in your body and my body existed at the Big Bang in some form. And that means that, of course, atoms take lots of different shapes. They can be stars, they can be planets, they can be, human life forms, they can be animals, they can be plants, they can be rocks. Atoms take lots of form. And we think, as we said, this group of cells that we call a brain is thinking and is capable of consciousness. But what is that collection of cells? It's nothing but atoms. And if you think about it, we're kind of arrogant that we would actually believe a bunch of gray matter inside our heads can be aware, can be conscious, can be knowing, can be the observer, but that can't possibly exist anywhere outside that gray matter. Well, what is the gray matter? It's atoms. So what if atomic energy is the source of all consciousness? What if the very nature of atoms is consciousness? And it just, if they can arrange themselves into a human brain that can think and be conscious, aren't we being kind of limiting to think that maybe that's not the nature of all energy, of all atoms, is consciousness? So anyway, it's kind of cool if you kind of step out of it and go, yeah, what if all energy is just pure consciousness? That's what it is. And then it can take the form of a rock. It can take the form of a human being. It can take the form of a star, a sun. And I thought, that's pretty cool. What if the goal of all consciousness is to experience itself in consciousness? Oh, okay. That gets interesting. So anyway, we could have a lot of fun, with these things.
That kind of changes the way one might look at life, right? Like, I think that could fundamentally shift how somebody might go through life. It has for me, not completely. I still have a bunch of baggage, but on a frequent basis, it really does guide the way I look at any particular situation. It's very, very difficult to shake that feeling.
Yeah, and to me, I just approach it. I guess the best way I know to boil it down is with curiosity. I just get curious about stuff. Why did this happen? Why did I hear that author's name 3 times this week? Why was I dying of a tumor in my small intestine over a period of months and nobody could find it? And probably just days before I died, my son crashed his bicycle at a friend's house, and my mother got to talking to the son's mother, found out she's a doctor, and her husband is a gastroenterologist, and he ran the right test the day later and found it and did surgery 2 days later, and here I am alive and ticking, where I've been to multiple doctors in the US and Mexico. And maybe that was just the whole story, the way it was supposed to unfold, because it makes for a better story that way. I don't know. I don't know. Life's just so friggin' interesting. And I think it stays interesting and entertaining if we just get curious about it rather than sure and convinced. Well, because I'll even say, if somebody comes to me and goes, I know God, and I'll go, whatever your puny little brain can imagine of God, I don't want a God that small. I want a God that my brain just can't wrap itself around. I want a God that is eternal. What does that even mean? I mean, the human brain can't grasp it.
Yep.
I can't grasp an ever expanding cosmos. How could that be? What's it expanding into? You know, where's it going? You know, where's the middle of all of that? I don't know. I don't know. But it's kind of cool to think about. It kind of freak your brain out trying to think about it.
It is, and I'm going to double click on something and backtrack. The thing that really frustrates me is people's surety, right? They're so convinced that they're right about everything, and not only are they convinced they're right, they need to convince everyone else. They need to change everyone's mind. They're going to scream at each other on Twitter. They're going to, it's a really bad place to be, because I think, as you mentioned, like, the older you get, if you have any wisdom whatsoever, you're paying attention at all, you should realize you don't know shit. And the older you get, the more you're aware of how little you know, and become less and less sure. But I've approached it same as you. Like, I look at this in a curious fashion. That's why I have these conversations. Like, hey, I'm interested. I want to explore all the facets of life. I don't want to just punch a clock and do my J job every day and, get a house, get a car, get a 401k and fucking die. Like, I think there's more to life, and it's such a fascinating world. I travel tons for work internationally. I've been all over the world, meeting different people, seeing different cultures, trying different foods, having different experiences. Like, that for me is something that's super interesting. And talking about ideas like this, it seems like everyone's not cut out for this, though. It's like a lot of people, they really enjoy being sure, even if they're wrong. They want to be part of a tribe, be part of a group to help to defend them and support their ideas and stuff. And man, I just would encourage people just to break out of that. Man, step outside the orthodoxy a little bit, poke around with ideas. You don't have to be right.
Go do ayahuasca. But that is human nature. We are tribal. I mean, we can't deny that. We grew up even just like having your favorite sports team, or whatever. We're tribal. You have your favorite band. All right, you're tribal. That's okay. It really is part of our human existence. And it's just like me walking through an airport, having judgment of everybody I see. In a sense, that's kind of tribal, saying, you're not me. You're not like me. I don't do things the way you do it. You're wrong. I'm good. And so that tribalism is probably wired into us. Probably prejudice and racism are wired into us. And that's okay. But what if we just became the observer of that and got curious about what we're so sure about, and whether it's, we think, this about that gender, we think this about that subject, or that about that race, or that about, this battle going on somewhere in the world, or this about this presidential candidate. We're also so friggin' sure. But, one of the things to consider almost on any subject, let's just take, the U.S. presidential election. I live in Mexico, but I'm still a U.S. citizen. And, of course, this week we all know that there was a big transition with, Biden dropping out of the race. I don't know when people will watch this. And maybe by the time they're watching it, the election will already have come and gone years
Let's hope not. I got to edit faster than that.
Okay. But they maybe, hopefully they're watching it, hopefully your material sticks around for a while. So I have to remember, there are intelligent people, really intelligent people, really well-informed people, really thoughtful people on all sides of the fence, whether it's Democrat or Republican, whether it's, pro-abortion, anti-abortion, whether it's pro-Israel, anti-Israel, whether it's pro-vaccines or anti-vaccine. There's highly intelligent, well-studied, people with good thinking capabilities on either side of the fence. And I think I'm so friggin' smart that I can be so sure. Now, again, some people are probably listening to this say, well, why would you want to live life if you weren't sure about anything? I don't know, maybe it's not such a bad idea, but it's our surety that probably makes us suffer. Buddha said that the attachment to outcome, isn't that what surety is? I'm attached to my way of thinking, my viewpoint, my judgments. They must be right. And Buddha said they're going to make us suffer. Now, it's interesting. Whenever I talk to people about this concept of Buddhism, as my ex-girlfriend used to call it, more than one reason we broke up, but that was one of them when she was explaining Buddhism to somebody. I hadn't thought of that in a long time. That just came out. That was a Freudian shit. So, getting attached to anything will make us suffer. And when I explain that to people, they get mad at me. Like, well, why would I even get up in the morning if I wasn't attached? Why would I talk to that woman if I wasn't attached to her liking me? Why would I go to work if I wasn't attached to having a paycheck? But the funny thing is, the more unattached you get, and maybe another way of putting it, the more outcome agnostic you become, the more equally okay with every possible outcome, which that's really hard to do. That's not in our human nature to be equally okay with every possible outcome. But the more we get that way, the more possibilities open up in front of us, the more opportunities, the more open doors, the more stuff we hadn't considered because, we're walking around with these blinders on, I'm sure of this, but how about all this really cool shit out there that we don't even see because we are attached to holding on to our tribal view of what is and what isn't. And so actually letting go of our surety and certainty peels back the blinders. It opens up. It gets us out of that default mode network. And you can actually play with this. I tell people, like, if you're stressed or anxious, you're in your parasympathetic nervous system. You're in your fight, flight, freeze. It's meant to narrow your view down to just a few things in front of you. And you can actually, if you go outside, and I'll tell people, look at a tree, look at something, about as far away as you can see and still make it out clearly. Put your focus on that. And now, without taking your focus off that, try to widen your peripheral view. Just see how much you can widen it. That alone actually begins to shift what's going on in the brain and in the chemicals, and it gets us out of that parasympathetic more into the sympathetic. And no, actually, I got that backwards. Sometimes I think, wait a minute, am I getting sympathetic and parasympathetic backwards? I did actually. But it gets us out of that fight, flight, freeze mode. And it actually widens our view of things. And the more we widen our view of things, the more interesting the world gets, the more open doors we see, the more opportunities to come, the more you get emails out of the blue saying, we'll pay your way to come to Costa Rica and do ayahuasca. And I go, how can I say no to that? Just interesting things happen when we can just broaden the possibilities.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. But I will say this in defense of surety.
I think we can go down that way too.
I think there was something that was empowering to me when I came from that religious mindset that said, hey, man, God's in control. He's going to take care of everything, working everything out for good. You're fine. It's going to be great, right? Like there was a confidence that comes with that. When you actually believe that the creator of the universe, all powerful, is guiding your steps in the right direction and everything is going to be okay, I think that can free people who otherwise might get paralysis analysis and not know what to do and get maybe mixed up, which leads me back to your point, which is I think there is some utility in some religion there, right?
It would not have existed for as long as it did if it didn't serve utility. And probably part of the utility is our need for tribe, our need for custom, our need for tradition, our need for ritual, our need for something that gives us something to attach ourselves to that we think is bigger and more powerful than ourselves. I think we do have a need for that. So yeah, and I think a lot of things can play those roles. And we like certainty. We like surety. We like knowing what we know is.
So I want to pivot a little bit because I got 20 minutes left, and I really want to dive into this because I'm so interested in doing ayahuasca. I have plans to go down to Costa Rica. I've been planning for years, and I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but I need to go. I want to get your take, and I've talked to some people that have done it before. What is, maybe talk to the uninitiated like myself, maybe talk about what is the experience like? Like what is the
Okay.
ceremony like? Like walk me through what that was like for you.
Well, I can tell you about my experience. And by the
Mhm.
way, one piece of advice I'll give people that after they do ayahuasca ceremony, don't try to tell people about it. It's like, you wake up and you tell them, maybe your partner, you would not believe the dream I had last night, right? And
Yep.
there's no way to explain the dream in any way that makes any coherent sense because you're trying to make coherent sense of it. So, in terms of the ayahuasca, mainly because I have kind of fairly limited knowledge and experience around things like this. Um, I remember when I first kind of started. I was in a men's program prior to this, and guys kept talking about plant medicine. I
Mm.
thought, what is plant medicine? What's that a euphemism for? Again, I grew up in a pretty straight white bread kind of world. And I thought, is that just like some kind of Burning Man kind of thing? And because most of the people I knew in this program were kind of like Burning Man kind of people,
Yeah.
were the real baggy, big crotch kind of pants and all that kind of stuff. And so I started asking them, what is plant medicine? And so I at least had gotten a little bit of education from people who'd done numerous ceremonies. Some people, many ceremonies. And so to say up front, there's probably no one way that an ayahuasca ceremony is led. And, there's, you don't have to go to Costa Rica. There's many places in the U.S. you can do it. I'm told a lot of places right around here where I am in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where you can go do ayahuasca journeys. And again, without going into the technical part of it, it's a combination of compounds found in plants that have some of the hallucinogenic effect of marijuana with some other stuff. Again, I'm not the chemist or the expert on it, but my experience of it is also built around tradition and around
Mm.
custom. Often call it mother or grandmother, talking about it being, nature, it having its wisdom, it knows what we need, it's going to give us what we need, not what we ask for. And it is a purging
Mm.
compound. And that purging can take a lot of different forms, all the way from yawning, which I didn't really realize as a form of purging, but I yawn when I'm stressed and I yawn a lot when I do ayahuasca. A number of people vomit. Usually, any place you go do an ayahuasca ceremony, there'll probably be a bucket there
Mhm.
and a roll of toilet paper where you're going to get up and vomit. I have never vomited on ayahuasca. I've had a few times where I thought I could. I didn't fight it. It just never went there. Now, I shit a lot when I do ayahuasca. That's how I purge. The first time I ever did it, I think I got a stomach infection from airplane food. So the day I got there, I was already shitting ahead of time. And they kind of bring a little bit of that spiritual woo-wooism. Oh no, the medicine began working the day you signed up.
I had E. coli. Shut up.
Yeah, 2 years ago, when you signed up, the medicine began working. So again, there's a little bit of that woo. And I go, okay, I'll be curious. But so every ceremony I've had, I do go to the bathroom a lot. And the place I went, there's sufficient bathrooms with lots of toilet paper, so you're good to go. And so there's various ways of purging. And one example, before one ceremony, you often create an intention. I mean, again, everybody that leads is different, and I did it in an environment that's very shaman oriented, that
Mhm.
had a room full of shamans, and then most of these shamans were Latin American, from Costa Rica, Guatemala, Colombia. Um, and so there's a lot of tradition wrapped in it, at least the way I did it. I think there's probably places they do it that it doesn't have all that tradition, that ceremony of it. But there was music to go with it. There's, there's a talk beforehand, a talk afterwards. But often they have you create an intention. Maybe they'll give you an intention. They said you might start with these intentions, or you can have an intention. And I had an intention. This is a couple years ago when I did it, 3 years ago, that I wanted to release all sexual shame.
Mm.
And that was my intention going into it. And there's different kinds of experiences you can have on ayahuasca. And again, I'm not the expert, so I'll probably get the names right, but there's like surgeries where you've had this experience of things coming into you and
Yeah,
pulling
yeah.
things out. I often will see a lot of just very, very vivid colors. I tend to see spaceships of our alien ancestors, which is not uncommon. I wonder what part of our brain records that, remembers that. But in this one experience where I had, and by the way, I'll just say up front, I've never had a dark experience. I've never had one where I just wanted to escape it. I thought I was going to die. I wished I'd never done it. I've never had that. People do have that. I've known people that every night they do it, they have that dark experience. My first time, my wife and I, when she did this with me, I bet it's her second night, I guess. She came up to me and said, I met every one of my childhood abusers and I forgave them all. Well, she went through some dark places to get to those childhood abusers, right? But I've never had a super dark experience. Now, with that said, the one where I wanted to release sexual shame, there's another experience that some people have that's called a nada. A nada in Spanish just means nothing. And so where it's like sleeping with no dreams. You just wake up and go, I was asleep. I don't remember anything. Right?
Oh, wow.
So that night that's all I had was nadas. I had no visions, but I woke up from nada and this was an all night one. Some of them are just 4 hours, 5 hours long. This was all night. And I woke up and the back of my shorts were wet. And I thought, I'm Costa Rica. Maybe I'm sweating, but I wasn't wet in front. And I thought, I got to go to the bathroom. And I'd shit my shorts.
Oh, geez.
And now, like I said, I've not had a dark ceremony, but so I shit my shorts. And so it was interesting because that night before we went to the ceremony, I was packing my bag with just stuff to take, my water bottle and all that. And Mother told me, take an extra pair of shorts. And I thought, I don't know why, but I did. I packed an extra pair of shorts. So I went and kind of cleaned myself up and put on the second pair of shorts and went back and drank some more of the ayahuasca, had another nada. I woke up, I'd shit my shorts again.
Oh my God.
And so I'm sitting there thinking, why didn't Mother tell me to bring 3 pairs of shorts? So I go clean myself up best I could and cleaned my shorts up and packed a lot of toilet paper in the back of my shorts and went up for another cup. And the shaman said, have you had any visions? I said, no. And I said, well, here's another cup. So I had I shit my shorts 3 times. So I go up to see the shaman and he says, have you had any visions? And I said, no, but I've shit my shorts 3 times. And he goes, that's amazing. He says, there's freedom in that. There's wildness in that. He celebrated me shitting my shorts. And you know what? That went a long way to releasing a lot of sexual shame, because probably a lot of our sexual shame begins around us shitting our diapers and the reaction that people have to that at a very, very early impressionable hypnotic stage of life, right? And so you don't get what you think you're asking for a lot of times. And just like when I asked what's the meaning of God in my eternal soul, I thought it was going to be some great big vision. It really just was almost just like a little printout. Water and waves. It's the ocean. You manifest as a wave, you unmanifest, you're still ocean. That's the whole story. That's it. I go, that really does explain everything. I really don't need any more than that. But as I said, other times I've had ceremonies that were just like a cosmic dance party. It was like, where did they get such a great laser light system in the ceiling here? And where did they get such a great sound system? They do have a good sound system. It's just like I understood every biblical archetype, all the meaning of existence, the purpose, of life, the cosmos. And then of course you wake up from it and go, oh, it's just a cosmic joke. None of it really does matter. We're just going to manifest and unmanifest. We're just going to be a wave that comes and goes, and that's really okay. So I've had many of different ceremonies. The one is harder to go into is the one where our alien ancestors did come back and asked me to be the king to lead the people of this planet for 10,000 years. They said, because you do have the mark of the king, and because I have a scar, a cleft lip here, so that's the mark of the king, and you do have the tattoo, which I do. that says El Rey, which is literally the king in Spanish. Yeah, my wife, a year before we got married, said, "Let's go." I go, "Where are we going?" "I got an appointment." "What kind of appointment?" "We're getting tattoos." She'd already planned it out. Sure says La Reina, the queen. Mine says El Rey. So I'm on an ayahuasca ceremony. They go, "You have the tattoo that says you are the king. Will you lead the people? Because our technology is destroying yet another planet. We're burning up another planet. There's more out there we can take you to, but we can't come back for 10,000 years to get you. So you've got to coexist on this planet for 10." So, out of that, alien ancestor vision, I mean, the lights, their spaceships are fucking amazing. Just the light. But out of that came, I think, a deeper sense that perhaps, what I have been called to do is to have as much of a positive influence as I can have on the people of this planet to help people be their best selves and live in a way where we don't destroy each other and don't destroy the planet. Now, am I going to be king for 10,000 years? I kind of doubt that, really, but it was still, if nothing else, a good metaphor, not to be taken literally, that says, I am here to make a difference. And I'm really okay with that. I'm here to make a difference. And so maybe that is my fate. Maybe that's me being a prophet to the nations. Maybe that's not being all that egotistical or cultish after all. Maybe I'm here to make a difference. And maybe, kind of going back to this, maybe this is true for all of us. Maybe we're all here to have an impact, to make a difference in our own unique way. And, okay. So that's kind of, maybe my best versions of ayahuasca is that it's anything and everything. I know the first night my wife was there, she tried to leave, and the shamans kind of went out and talked her down. And she's told me later, she's thinking, who was that fucking asshole that told me to come here and do this? Now, she grew up Mexican, pretty strict, devout Catholic, believes in, black magic, believes in spells, believes in demons, she believes all those things. I don't particularly, but maybe they exist. I don't know. But I'm open to the idea, possibly. So it was a very spiritual experience for her in those ways. But like once she kind of got through that, I got to escape it. And the second time she went, she got over the fear that she's going to wet her pants if she vomits. And now after the ceremony, she comes, yeah, I wet my pants twice. It's kind of like she's proud of that. So, some people really love just that depth of experience, all the way from the puking to just letting go. I said, my wife absolutely loves that. My experiences have not been that extreme, but they've all been powerful and meaningful. And so, for me, I'd say, I'm open to doing it maybe once a year, every other year. I don't know. I know some people that do it pretty regularly. I know reading Ram Dass's autobiography, watching his behavior early on with the psychedelics and then even going into the meditation, it almost seems like, there's some people that just almost get addicted, and you can't get addicted to MDMA or psilocybin or ayahuasca, but almost addicted to that search, for that spiritual meaning, to that crumbling of the the duality. And so again, everybody has their own experiences around this stuff. And again, the advice I always put out is don't try to explain to anybody in a way that makes sense what you got out of a ceremony. I'm doing it with 2 or 3 years to put it back to having thought about it enough to put things in a perspective, if nothing else, to show the weirdness of how things can be.
Yeah. And by the way, I should have prefaced that. It's like, hey, fellow psychedelic.
I love that word. Ineffable. Yeah. And things were melting, and but no, and that dogs are God's gift to remind us of God's love. I don't know. It's just that's all the stuff I've come away with that is meaningful to us, and nobody else will have a clue what you're talking about unless they've had similar meaningful experiences along the way. And often you'll find that some people, yeah, I had something real similar.
Yeah, I find that there's that camaraderie of people that have had those experiences. We sort of kind of understand each other, even though our experiences differ. It's just kind of like a brotherhood or sisterhood of people that do that. And so yeah, that laying that as a groundwork, like I just wanted to put that out there. That yeah, you can't explain it, and I get it, it's imperfect, but I'm super curious about the experience. Here's one
Yeah.
thing I want to end with. We're getting short on time. Super interesting to me is the concept of the mother with ayahuasca. That's typically something that people claim to encounter, and the accounts are shockingly similar from person to person, cross culturally.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that's important before I'm going to give you an opportunity to describe your experience with the mother, if you can, to any degree. Um, Interesting that the DMT, if you know the pharmacology, it's ayahuasca. It's
Yeah.
DMT plus a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, right? That's why this a vine of one thing, plant or the leaves of the other, mixed in a
Yeah.
tea. You can take something like Harmaline or some other MAOI plus DMT orally, and you have very psychedelic experiences. There's no mother. That I find
That's interesting.
super interesting, that unless you actually take the vines and the leaves from the forest and make the tea and brew it and all that stuff, you don't get the mother experience. So I think that is an interesting preface to giving you the floor to explain what your experience is like, because I'm very intrigued. I want to do this. I've heard other accounts of this. I wanted to hear what your experience was. What is it like meeting the mother?
Yeah, and I don't know that I can say I met the mother. I don't know that I can
Mm,
say that per se. I didn't go looking for the mother. And I'd heard even before I'd done ayahuasca that is a feminizing experience.
mhm.
It is about connection. It is about flow of love. Whereas I'm told that peyote is kind of like a grandfather.
And San
Just
Pedro cactus too, very similar experience. They call it, the Mexicans in particular call it the father of some sort. I can't remember what the
yeah,
translation is.
and so it's a more masculine
Mm,
experience. Now, I did have a conversation with my mother, maybe second or third ceremony I ever did, and I brought up the stuff about her taking me to this fundamentalist church and how that was traumatizing, and she goes, "Oh, I didn't believe any of that horseshit either. I just knew you needed to have that experience." And she still actually goes to the same church and practices, but maybe she doesn't believe the horseshit either. I don't know. But
mm.
in the ceremony, it's kind of like, I just knew you would need to have this, and that's why I gave it to your life. So in there was the wisdom of what we think we needed or what would have been best for us. There's this wisdom in that what we did get is what's best. So even shitting your shorts 3 times in one night was exactly what was best and what was needed for the experience. Now, again, it does take a little bit of, I don't know, woo woo is the right word, but you got to have some willingness to suspend being too literal, being
Mm.
too factual, which is good for people like me because I kind of have more of a scientific mind that I want to research everything first. I want to
Me too.
understand if I'm going to put something in my body. I want to
Mm.
even with my nutrition coach before I take a supplement or even the exercises she gives me to do. I go check them. How to it's like I'm just built that way, right? So
Yep.
that's why ayahuasca, I think, was really good for me because you got to just say, I'm letting go for a little while. I'm letting go. And I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust the letting go process. And that's good for me. It's good for me to do that every now and then.
Got it. Got it. Well, hey, man, we just reached an hour, and I could literally talk to you for about 6 more. This is such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining my show. I'm nobody, just barely starting out. I really appreciate the time you've invested in this, and it's just been an absolutely delightful conversation, man. I would love to have you back sometime.
Well, Brent, I will appreciate how knowledgeable and informed you are. And I expect some really good things are going to come out of this process. So thank you for even the ways you educated me because you have a good, I often tell people, I like saying stupid stuff because then smart people correct me and I get an education that way. So that's the quickest way I know to get free education. Say stupid stuff and then people correct you.
That's
No, it's not parasympathetic; it's sympathetic. Oh yeah, that's right. So it's So thank you for the wisdom you brought, and thank you for the learning you've shared with me.
Yeah, really appreciate it, man. All the best. I really love your work, and maybe sometime we'll dive into the other more traditional topics that you cover. Maybe
All
not.
right.
We'll
Well,
see.
tell me, what part of are you still in Seattle?
Oh no, I'm in Nashville now. Yeah, I've been in Nashville about
Nashville.
2 years. Yep.
All right. What part of Seattle were you in?
I lived on Lake Tapps, is where my house was, but I worked
Oh,
downtown Seattle.
I know where Lake Tapps is. Yeah, I've water skied out on Lake Tapps before.
Beautiful.
My mother lives on Lake Sammamish, so I was
Yep.
just up there a week ago. I was camping up at Denny Creek for a couple weeks.
Oh,
So
wow. We were there at the same time. I just got back from there.
yeah, I did too. I got back Saturday. So there
Now,
we go. We got all these things in common.
I'm telling,
You got to get a little more gray. That's the only difference.
I'm working on it, man. I'm working on it. So it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. All right. Great to talk to you, Brent. Thanks for
Yep.
the invite.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Bye.